Okay, now we want to talk about how are sedimentary rocks classified. And so when we talked about igneous rocks, there were two things that we would use: the texture of the igneous rock and then the composition. So what minerals were in the igneous rock. So you can see that we're going to use basically the same kind of formula. We're going to talk about the texture of the sedimentary rock, and then we're going to talk about the composition. So texture, there are three kinds of texture. So one is going to be clastic, which is going to mean it's pieces of rock that are either pressed together or glued together. It's going to be bioclastic, which means it's going to be pieces of shells and things that are glued together. And then it's going to be crystalline, which means that it forms from a precipitate. So let's first talk about the clastic textures, which are based on the size of the grains that are going to be glued together. So you could have boulders, which are going to be greater than 256 millimeters, which is going to be about this big. Okay, then anything between 2 millimeters, so about that big, up to 256 millimeters is going to be considered gravel. Then anything between 1/16 and 2 millimeters is going to be considered sand. Okay, then you've got silt, which is between 1/256th of a millimeter up to 1/16th of a millimeter. And the problem is you can't feel it. So with silt, if you run it between your fingers, you won't be able to feel silt-sized grains. However, you can taste them. So if you were to take a piece of siltstone and break off some of those grains, you could feel the grittiness up against your teeth. On the other hand, if you try that with clay, clay particles are so small that you would not be able to notice any grittiness when it comes to clay. So if you're an old-time geologist, that was one of the ways that they would tell the difference between a siltstone and a clay stone. I don't know how their teeth are today, but anyway, that was one way that they could do it. Okay, now we have already talked about what is a bioclastic texture. So that, for example, when you've got pieces of shells that are glued together, that's going to be bioclastic. And then also you could have like leaves and twigs that are going to be pushed together. So that would be like coal, and that would be also considered a bioclastic texture. Okay, then you've got things that are crystalline, and so these are going to form out of solution. Then the second major way of classifying sedimentary rocks is going to be based on what are they made of. So we're going to find that there are some sedimentary rocks that are made of the mineral calcite. There are some that are made of silica, sand, for sand-sized quartz grains, for example, makes up sandstone. And then you could also have things like gypsum and carbon. So all of these are different compositions that will determine the identity of the sedimentary rock. Okay, so let's take a break, and when we come back, we will show how all of these different kinds of rocks are organized.